When her first child cried out, she was only 19 years old. A reckless child just out of school, not yet knowing what life was. The child's father disappeared like a gust of wind at the beginning of the season. She did not cry. She did not beg. She just squeezed her hand, held her child close, and whispered, "I will not give up." That was the first day she understood what it was like to be alone. No relatives around, no one to help. The tiny rented room was where the mother and child huddled in the middle of the city's winter, where meals were only instant noodles and hope. She worked part-time at a restaurant, held her child to sleep during breaks, and took advantage of cheap online university law classes. Every night, when her child was fast asleep, she would start studying in silence under the flickering desk lamp. People often ask, "Why don't you give up? Raising a child alone is hard enough. Why dream of becoming a lawyer?" She just smiled slightly, answering with a quote from Marcus Aurelius, "Do the right thing, don't wait for others to understand." There were times when life pushed her into a corner. Her child was sick, the rent was unpaid, the shop owner deducted her salary for breaking a glass. Everything seemed to want to crush the weak will of a single mother. But it was in those moments that she returned to the simplest things. She reminded herself, as Epictetus once taught, "It's not what happens to you that matters, but how you react to it." She couldn't control the losses, the scorn, or even the indifference of society. But she could control herself, waking up earlier every day, concentrating more on each study hour, getting up every time she fell. On her first day of law school, she wore an old shirt, holding a torn notebook. The other students, young and fashionable, talked about vacations, about internship opportunities at big companies. She was silent. Not because of guilt, but because she was fighting on another battlefield. Every class hour was a war. Every exam was a battle. No one knew she had to carry her child to school, ask a classmate to look after her for a few minutes so she could run to the exam. No one saw the silent tears that fell when her score was not as expected, because last night her child had a fever and she did not sleep. But no one saw her smile when her child first called her mom, or when the professor said, "Your essay is very profound." She knew that each step was a step closer to her dream. One day, while pushing a stroller to the library, an older woman approached and asked, "Are you a student?" "With this child." She nodded. "What do you want to do?" "I want to be a lawyer." The woman smiled, but it was not a mocking smile. She took her hand and said, "Don't let anyone tell you what's impossible." That sentence, like a small fire, lit a spark of hope in her. From then on, she learned more about Stoicism. Not some far-fetched philosophy, but practical principles of living. Accepting the situation, doing what you can, keeping your mind as steady as a rock. She wrote in her diary every day, "Today I will focus on what I can control. Criticism does not weaken me, unless I let it." In her senior year of college, she interned at a small law firm. She worked, raised her son, and studied for exams. The pressure was so heavy that one night she collapsed at her desk, her head still on her files. But every time she did, she closed her eyes and imagined her son playing in a warm house. And she remembered Seneca's quote, "We are not made miserable by our circumstances, but by our way of looking at them." Instead of thinking, "I have nothing," she learned to think, "I have more opportunities to practice willpower than anyone else." On graduation day, she walked onto the stage in a black gown, holding her bachelor's degree in one hand and her young son in the other. The whole room stood up and applauded. There were cries, there were cheers. But she did not shed tears. Because she understood, this was just a journey, not yet a glory, but an affirmation. Affirmation, will is stronger than fate. Affirmation, single mothers are not victims, but warriors. A few years later, she became a full-time lawyer, specializing in helping other single mothers. Those who, like her, had the weight of the world on their shoulders. She not only provided legal advice, but also brought her Stoic philosophy to every trial, every consultation. One day, she said to a recently divorced woman holding 2 children, "You have the right to be sad. But don't let that sadness determine your actions. Do the right thing, even if it's hard, even if no one sees it." The woman nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. And she knew that fire, that hope, was still being passed on. Her story is not just about overcoming difficulties. It is a living testament to the ancient philosophy that every adversity is an opportunity to train the soul. Stoicism does not teach people to be indifferent. It teaches us to feel without being controlled by emotions. It teaches us to stand firm when life is rough. It teaches us to understand, what matters is not the easy path, but who we become after that journey. And she, a single mother, has become a model of resilience, of courage, and of unconditional love. A silent warrior. A lawyer of hope. A man who chose not to give up, and changed his life in the process.